Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as VRTrader.com. He was the #1 U.S. stock market timer in the January 2020 edition of Timer Digest. He's speaking to us from Arizona. Welcome back to the show, Mark.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Mark, do you still have that special offer for our listener?
We sure do. It is 2020 half off. You go to VRTrader.com and apply that as a promo code. Again, it's 2020 half off.
Mark, we know you're not only just a contrarian, but also a skeptic on what we officially are being told by the mainstream media. What else is happening out there that you find interesting and maybe even a big-time deal, but it's not being discussed right now in the mainstream?
Yeah, we look at a lot of stuff, and I'm over the years, besides looking at my pure technical work, my volume, reversal in particular, and basic technical analysis, I became a bit of a contrarian and skeptic. And one of the reasons for that is my mentor, this goes back many decades, was telling me about, let's use the word nicely, the dishonesty of the equity markets. In fact, the first thing he told me when I entered the business, he says, Mark, you're about to enter the most crooked business in the world run by the biggest thieves. Are you still interested in doing this? So, I thought he was a little bit eccentric at the time, and over the years I learned that was not the case. We've seen a whole slew of financial disasters and events, including those like the Madoff event where people had lost money and virtually had their assets stolen from them. And then he was telling me stories about how the financial press, is compromised, and that stories are planted to move stocks both up and down. And we found over the years that also does happen. And then beyond that, I started getting into cyclical work and looking at other events that, trigger market movements. I became active in looking at cycle analysis. There's an organization, the Foundation for the Study of Cycles, and you look at everything from solar flares, and I've discussed, the lunar cycles as well. And I came across a lot of financial astrologers over the years that became good friends of mine, and though I'm not an astrologer, I certainly pay attention to some of their reports, particularly if they overlap some of the analysis that I'm doing. And that's sort of the generic background. So, looking at, recent events with the virus and, the loss of our freedoms and all the nonsense that's come about here in the last literally, 4 or 5 months, I just can't help but believe that there's something of greater significance behind all this other than just necessarily a political move to change the world into a globalist economy and a communist or socialist society. That may be the motivation and it's all a planned event, so I don't believe the virus was any accident. It's definitely a planned event of some kind, and we've already seen some research that there were papers and research studies done talking about how a pandemic could possibly accomplish both political and social goals, and names like without mentioning the names, we know who the big name players are were involved in that, in some of these papers and research reports that have come out over the years. And then on top of all that, I'm looking at the geocosmic world. We have risks of comets and asteroids out there. I track all the NASA websites There's actually websites you can track for asteroid tracking, for all kinds of fun stuff out there, solar flares, put all those pieces together. And I talk about those a bit in my newsletter as well. And on top of, the normal seasonal patterns that we talk about as well, such as the solstices and eclipses and equinoxes that occur periodically and how they do impact change of directions in the marketplace. We saw a classic example in the vernal equinox in March, for example, with a market bottom within a week of the or 10 days of the vernal equinox, and now we enter the solar solstice period, and sure enough, the market has been at a bit of a toppy action here in the last couple of weeks, so that kind of stuff. So, just a whole potpourri of interesting indicators that we sort of throw together, and then, it's like anything else, the old weather forecaster analogy that I've made. You can make all these forecasts, put all these pieces together. You can look at all the websites, look at all the theories, but ultimately you want to look out the window, you know what I mean, to make sure what the short-term stuff is really saying, what the charts are saying, and so forth. So that's sort of the general background of, what we were looking at. And just recent sessions we had, in the last couple trading sessions, we had some earthquakes starting to show their face. There's some noted analysts out there, other than myself, talking about the potential of increased volcanic activity around the planet in coming months and years, and certainly that would have, an impact on not only weather, but, our crops and the economy. I'm trying to recall the exact event. There was some huge I think it was Krakatoa. Was it back in 1817? I don't know if that was the event where, it went off, and they called it like was it the summer without sun or something at the time? It was way back a couple hundred years ago when that volcano went off. The whole Earth had been impacted by the dust in the atmosphere. So there are some theories out there based in science that we could be seeing, increased activity on the planet, which could affect us in big ways here coming up. So we'll see, how all that plays out. And I'm not ignoring those at all. I'm putting those into the scheme of things. We are in a very negative period here in terms of what's happened, both to individuals because of the virus and the economic setback that's occurred, and we seem to be in the cyclic period of a couple of years. So what's happening right now or just after the election in November may not tell the tale. Like this could be a very volatile period here in the next couple of years, which might incorporate the geocosmic, it might incorporate the economic, it might incorporate the political, and you got to put all these pieces together, and I think ultimately we will see the answer. But in the meantime, people look to me to try to get some type of forecast on the markets. So I guess if there's an asteroid headed to us, it won't make a difference, right? But in the meantime, if that doesn't happen, they want to know if the stock market's going up and how to protect their assets. So I've been pretty good on that over the years. No one's 100%. And they did rank me number one U.S. market timer last year, as you mentioned. I'm still on the list this year. I think I'm in the 4th or 5th slot, and we are, currently a bit bearish here. So we'll see how it all plays out, and that's a long-winded response. Thank you for asking.
Mark, so what's your overall game plan between now and the U.S. election?
More cautious, but I think, we have a lot of forces at work here. We've got the Federal Reserve out there, and the U.S. Treasury and foreign central banks out to manipulate the markets, keep interest rates low, actually buy securities. We know Japan was doing it for the longest time, and now the U.S. is in there even buying junk bonds. They bought, the U.S. Federal Reserve bought some junk bonds, and Hertz, the company, went bankrupt even after they were bankrupt. I mean, nonsense like this. I mean, we've known about this for many years. During the crash in 2008 and 9, Bernanke was out there buying stocks in some companies. At the time, I printed in the list of the names that they were buying stocks in at the time, and nobody believed that was happening, but they did. So there's no big surprise that the government's in there doing some really extraordinary things. So as a result of that, the market is not going to go straight down. There's going to be a lot of trading opportunities. My big concern is the U.S. election, as you mentioned. What happens there? I don't believe a Democratic win is good for the stock market, even though it's also bad for the political world and our personal freedoms. That's a whole other issue because of the unfortunate tie to a lot of communist and socialist thinking. But in the event that Trump is not reelected, I just can't imagine the stock market doing well. Now, we know over time, if you got rational people in the right place, we've known over through the last century, that there are bull and bear markets no matter who sits in the White House or what party is in power. So that's also a truism. So the question is, what kind of nutcases would be ruling the government in the case of a Democratic victory, or whether it won't be as bad as we were thinking it will be. So that's sort of the offset, because even the Democrats, as crazy as they are, many of them still want to make money. So I don't know if they want to destroy the economy or not, but we'll find out at the time. So that's also the big thing. So what we're doing right now, we're a little bearish here. We think there should be a correction, and it will be tradable, down and up and down and up. But I think as you get through the summer, as we get closer to the election, Jim, I think traders are going to get more and more nervous about that outcome. So it could be a good time to stand aside.
We'll have more with Mark Leibovit right after this.
Cypress Development Corp. is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp. trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Mark Leibovit. Mark, what's happening with gold and silver with your work? Some listeners seem to find it hard to believe that gold could ever go down again.
During the collapse here in March, if you were tracking the gold market and the gold shares, they collapsed along with the stock market, so they were not an inverse indicator or an inverse tool to make money, and many times they do track with the overall market. So being a little cautious here on stocks has made me a little more cautious on the gold shares, though I know there's a lot of good reasons to own them. The potential profitability as with the current price of gold, the shortages that exist out there. So we're bullish overall. It's just that short term we're a little concerned about whether they're going to mirror any choppiness in the overall market here. If you're long term, that's a whole different story. We're not making a long term prediction here. We're just trying to time some of the near term moves, and I think gold will move higher as the months unfold here, and they could be bottoming any day here. We'll watch the indicators as they unfold. We'll put it in our newsletter. I have a bigger concern even beyond the very short term, though. My fear of the deflation and what that might do. If I'm correct about the deflation theory, inflation first maybe, but deflation later, as reality, as reality strikes and hits the fan, so to speak. Here, the cream puff hits the fan, and they find out that all this money printing and everything backfired, and we have bigger problems out there economically. In which case, gold could run up and then suddenly collapse in a deflationary environment. So that's going out a bit. I'm not 100% convinced that'll happen, but it is a possibility. We're watching that as well. So you might get a big run in gold. All the gold bulls are happy, and then suddenly the rug is pulled out from underneath them at a later point when it comes least expected. So, we're trying to cover all the bases here, but for the time being, I think, a buyer on a dip in the gold market and the gold shares, time correctly to some technical indicators is probably the wiser short to near-term strategy.
We'll have more with Mark Leibovit right after this.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Mark Leibovit. Mark, anything else in the market or the news that's getting your attention?
Pretty much what we've covered up to this point, Jim. You know, we're watching the geocosmic stuff. We're watching the technical indicators. We're watching some individual sectors. Since last week, we're paying attention to some of the solar stocks. Some of those are showing some life again. It's been a big favorite of ours over the last several years. I'm a little reluctant to chase just about anything at this juncture. I think most stocks follow the market. They are tradable, but they are on our list. And as far as the technical indicators, they're just telling us to be a little cautious here. But we're concerned about the political and social events that have unfolded, and frankly, very disappointed in the lack of response on the part of many state and local governments here in the U.S. and subduing some of the insurrection that seems to be occurring, which is an understatement. So in my newsletter this past couple days, I don't know if I can pull it up or not, but I made reference to, see if I can pull it up here, what Nikita Khrushchev said many, many years ago. I think it was 61 years ago. And basically said in his presentation, it might have been at the United Nations at the time, there are 8 levels of control that leads to a socialistic state. And I don't want to tie us, your listeners, up here, but basically he said, or tied to his beliefs, you can control healthcare and you control the people, increase poverty as high as possible so poor people are more easier to control. So you can look to this virus thing, if that's part of the so-called plan, increase debt to an unsustainable level. That way you could increase taxes, and that'll produce even more poverty, remove the ability of people to defend themselves, remove gun control, for example, have more gun control, take control of every aspect of our food, housing, and income, take control of what people read and listen to in our educational environment. We've certainly seen that with, history being rewritten in many books being burned, and also religion, remove the belief of religion from government. Of course, the tearing down of statues and so forth is part and parcel to this thinking, and class warfare, divide the people, and a lot of that's been going on. So, basically, he said at the time. He said, live boldly even if you're surrounded by cowards and critics. And that was his message 61 years ago. He said, your children will live under communism. And we think that's sort of ridiculous. And now we're seeing, communists arise back into the U.S. and met so many people, both that live in Canada today and the U.S., who had migrated from Europe, left because of communism and socialism, and now we're finding that arise here in the U.S., even the thought of it. So we have a lot of very sick people. There's a very great quote that I love to keep repeating. It's the basis of a book. I'm not going to make a lot of friends by saying this, but Michael Savage, he's a noted commentator here in the U.S. I respect a lot, not 100%, but a lot of what he says. He wrote a book within the last 10 or 12 years entitled Liberalism is a Mental Disorder. And every time I hear and see any of these things, that's my best response. These are mentally ill people, because if you see the facts, they would not support their actions.
Mark, can you remind our listeners again about your special offer?
Right. And when the people are listening to this, what does this have to do with the stock market? So it all has to do with the stock market, because if we're in a communist state, are we going to have a stock market? The offer is 50-50, half, 2020 half off, 2020 half off. Go to vrtrader.com. That's Victor Robert, vrtrader.com. Thank you, Jim.
Mark, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
If you have any questions for Mark or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@housestreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HouseStreet. We're also on Facebook. Thank you for listening. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.